Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And as we sit here on August 1st, 2033, just past the trade deadline, I think we're doing a pretty good job saving the A's this year. We are 11 games behind in the American League West, which certainly does not sound very good, but the team ahead of us, the Texas Rangers, happens to be the best team in baseball here in 2033. At 60 and 47, we are 4 games up on the Chicago White Sox for the second wild card spot in the American League, and we're 7.5 games up on our division rival Houston Astros to avoid being out of the playoffs. So we're in a pretty decent position here. Obviously, would love to potentially get a first round bye, but being 11 games out on August 1st, that is relatively unlikely. So we're likely setting ourselves up for a dreaded best of three wildcard series, most likely with the Baltimore Orioles, or I guess possibly the New York Yankees if the Orioles get by the Yankees in the AL East. Those best of three wildcard series are very unpredictable. We've actually been in a wildcard series each of the last 2 years, and we've won both of them in 3 games. So perhaps we're good in those series, or perhaps we're due for a loss in a wildcard series. But if we are able to close the deal over these final 55 games of the season and guide the A's into the playoffs, it will mark a fourth playoff appearance for Oakland in the last 5 years, which, given that we've pretty consistently had the lowest budget in all of baseball, is not a bad result. Taking a look at the leaderboards here with a couple months to go in the season, Bobby Cabral, who won the home run derby this year at the All-Star game, defeating his teammate Colt Keith, is third in the American League with 29 homers. The aforementioned Colt Keith is third in the AL with 82 runs batted in. And Luis Lara, our longtime center fielder, is third in the American League, actually tied for second in the American League with Jackson Holliday with 25 stolen bases. Although our pitching staff has been our strength just far this year, and we rank second in the American League in runs against, we don't have any pitchers right at the top in the rankings in the major pitching categories this year. As we get ready for this month of August to begin, take a quick look at the schedule. Got a lot of games against teams from Los Angeles. Start off with 3 against the Angels, the first one today. Then we'll be at Arizona and Colorado. Then 4 home against the Angels, 2 home against the Los Angeles Dodgers. And then we continue in the division the rest of the month at Seattle, at the Angels again, at Texas, and then home against Seattle. So a lot of games against Western Division teams in the AL West and the NL West over the course of the month of August. In fact, it is exclusively our rivals from the Western divisions that we'll be facing here in August of 2033. We did make a couple of moves as we got close to the trade deadline that we think will ultimately help us. We made a trade for Brian Ramos, who was briefly with us last year as a rental to help us in our playoff push. Let him sign with Houston, and they were willing to deal him to us. Had to give up a former first-round draft pick, so it was not cheap to bring Ramos on board, but we'll have him this year and next year, with the Astros retaining a good chunk of his salary, which hopefully will help our offense. We also made a trade for another reunion with our longtime catcher, the left-handed hitting Drake Baldwin. We let him move on after the previous season. We had a team option for him, but we traded him away to turn the starting catcher spot over to Jaden Boakai, who came up through our organization. Boakai is very good defensively, but has not hit much this year, so figured bringing the left-handed hitting Baldwin on board and starting him against right-handed pitching and moving Boakai into a role where he'd be starting only against left-handed pitching hopefully will result in more offense from our catchers and still pretty strong and solid defense. Team chemistry, I know, is something that a lot of you want me to check in on from time to time. Right now, chemistry is ecstatic. No one has any complaints. We've got a couple of captain personalities with Justin LeBron and Jason DeCaro, a lot of leaders, a couple of spark plugs, no negative personalities on the team, so things are going pretty well thus far here in 2033, and certainly having a 60-47 record will help with that. Staff cohesion is also happy. Don't have a lot of conflicts on the team. The only potential conflict that's really out there is our pitching coach, Brian Conger, who struggles a little bit with our manager, Kip Wells, but given the productivity we've gotten from our pitchers over the years, don't think that there's anything too significant happening on that front. Although July was the worst month of the year thus far for our Oakland A's, and the only month we've had with a losing record after an 11-13 record in the month of July, still pretty confident that when all is said and done, this team is going to make it to the postseason. Probably not going to be a ton of action in this episode, quite honestly. The biggest decisions we're likely to have to make is when we get to September 1st, which 4 players we'll bring up for September call-ups and how we can hopefully use those players on our pitching staff or in our lineup to ensure that we'll end up guiding this team into the playoffs. But other than that, unless we have some significant injuries, probably not going to be a ton of decision-making for us over these next 2 months. And we have gotten August off to a solid start. Won a couple of series on the road at the Angels and at Arizona. So a 4-2 start is certainly not perfect, but a good start. Got some interesting news. A couple of our former players or former potential players were the American League and National League Players of the Week this past week. Shoji Bame of the Dodgers, monster week, 440 average, 6 homers and 8 ribbies. So Bame continues to hit very well for Los Angeles. 139 WRC plus on this year, 259 batting average, exactly where he was a year ago. Looks like he will probably hit more than the 36 homers he hit a year ago, but he very well may strike out more than the 208 times he struck out in his rookie season in Major League Baseball. And our former shortstop, Brian Rincon, was the American League Batter of the Week. 12 hits, including 2 doubles and 5 ribbies. Rincon, however, not having a big offensive season, batting just 209 on the year, but he is 23 of 24 on the base paths, and with his solid glove has put up a 2.4 WAR for the Los Angeles Angels. And we've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is we're 3-2 since the last time we checked in. Split the 2-game series in Colorado, but we've taken 2 out of the first 3 at home against the Angels. So as we sit here on August 13th, 10 games behind the Rangers in the division. We are 5 games up on the White Sox for the final wild card spot, and 8.5 games up on the Blue Jays, who have won 7 in a row at this point, for missing out on the playoffs. Colt Keith and Luis Lara have actually both made progress. They're second in the league in ribbies and stolen bases, respectively, at this point. But our good friend Bobby Cabral is no longer in the top 3 as far as home runs. The bad news is we're going to have some interesting decisions to make on our roster. Tough injury situation that just evolved for us with both of our catchers, Drake Baldwin suffering a fractured foot and Jaden Boyakai with an oblique strain. So We're going to have two new catchers for the rest of the month of August and probably into September. Mason Miller, who we put on the IL a couple of weeks ago, still about 2 weeks away from recovering from forearm tendonitis. Levi Sterling, who we put into his spot in the rotation, has at this point started 2 games, and he's been really good. 2-0 record with 18 strikeouts over 15 and a third innings and a sub-3 ERA. So Sterling getting the opportunity to show what he could do in the rotation, with the expectation that with the potential departures of Chase Burns and or Jackson Ferris, that there could be multiple spots in the rotation available next year. And Levi Sterling making a strong argument that he should be considered for one of them. And we only had 3 catchers on the 40-man roster, so we ended up really having to shift things around to ensure that we could get 2 catchers up to the major leagues. What we did to open up a second spot on the 40-man was move Josh Teeples, who was on the AAA injured list with a torn rotator cuff since June. We put him on the 60-day IL to open up that spot on the 40-man roster. Teeples is a guy we picked up in a trade with Baltimore almost 2 years ago. Haven't ever really given him a shot in the majors. He's 26 years old now. Right-handed arm who can start, can relieve, but he hasn't been particularly good for us in AAA, and obviously won't be pitching this year, still trying to recover from that torn rotator cuff. We already had Ken Weaver on the roster, and he was up with us a couple of years ago in 2031 briefly. You may remember when we jumped him all the way from AA to the majors. He has since spent a full year in AA, and then this entire current season in AAA. He's been a pretty productive offensive player at both levels, competent defensively, and he is a guy who is in his last option year, so he conceivably could be fighting for our backup catcher spot next year, or who knows, he could even potentially push Jaden Boakai for that starting catcher spot next year, given that Boakai hasn't torn things up at the major league level. But Weaver will be starting for us against right-handed pitching as a switch hitter. And then the right-handed hitting Ryan Jeffers, who we signed as a minor league free agent, was not even playing all that much for us in AAA because he was behind Weaver, but had been productive offensively, has a captain personality, and is a experienced major leaguer with over 11 years of major league service. A right-handed hitter. He's actually reasonably competent looking against left-handed pitching, so he'll be starting for us against lefties. So we're going to continue a platoon at catcher. It's just two entirely different players than the 2 who were previously in the platoon for us. And another good news, bad news situation as we've simmed ahead about another week. The good news is we keep playing well on the field. We took the 4th and final game to win that series against the Angels, split a couple of games at home against the Dodgers, and we've now won the first 2 in Seattle. So as we sit here on August 20th, still 11 games behind the Rangers, who still have the best record in baseball, but we are 6.5 up on the final wild card spot, and we've closed to being only half a game behind the Orioles for the potential home field advantage in that series that's looking increasingly likely to take place between us and the runner-up in the American League East. Cabral, Keith, and Lara continue to show up on the home run, ribby, and stolen base leaderboards. Mentioned that there was some bad news, and it is another injury, and this one is significant, but not going to be crippling, hopefully. Kyle Manzardo, our rental first baseman for this year, going to be out 3 weeks with a concussion. He has been a very important offensive player for us this year. Put up a 129 WRC plus with 22 homers and 84 ribbies through the first 120 games he played this year. Not going to likely have him back till around mid September, I would think. So his opportunity to have a 100 ribby season may have been lost to this concussion. But hopefully he will be back and healthy for the playoffs, because it is looking increasingly likely as we continue moving forward that we will be in the postseason again this year, despite this recent rash of injuries. And with the injury to Manzardo, we've recalled Kevin Stubblefield back from AAA. You may remember we sent him down after he made the trade for Ramos, wanting to ensure that Stubblefield would get to play every day because he was only going to be playing against lefties in the majors for us. But with the injury that just happened, he's going to be in the lineup against both lefties and righties. He was crushing it in AAA, as you might expect for a player with his profile. Hit .354 with 10 homers and 25 ribbies in the 99 at-bats he had down there. So hopefully it's got his bat going in the right direction, because he was certainly hitting much worse this year at the major league level than he did a year ago. So hopefully that month or so that he spent in AAA will jumpstart his bat and allow him to be a lot more productive at the major league level than he had been over the first half of this season. And despite the injuries, things have continued to go reasonably well here in the month of August. We ended up completing a sweep against Seattle. We did lose our first series of the month, dropping 2 out of 3 in Los Angeles against the Angels, but we since bounced back, taking 2 out of 3 against the first place Rangers, and we will finish off the month of August with 3 games at home against Seattle before we get to September roster expansion. And we did drop 2 of 3 at home against Seattle, so after not losing a series until the final week and a half of the month, we've now lost 2 of the last 3 series that we've played, but we are still in a very good position on September 1st. Although we're 12 games back in the division, we are 6 games up on the White Sox for the final wild card spot in the American League, and we are 10 games up on potentially being out of the playoffs. So our magic number to clinch a playoff spot is 20, sitting here on September 1st. And the hope would still be that we can make up 2 games on the Orioles, so we'll be potentially hosting a wild card series against them, although the Yankees and the Orioles are still in quite a battle in the AL East, so it's conceivable that the Orioles could end up getting by the Yankees when all is said and done, and we'll end up battling with the Yankees for that wild card series. Taking a look at our team statistics here, we've improved to 5th in the American League in runs scored. We were 6th as of the beginning of August, so small step in the right direction there. And we actually improved from 2nd in the American League in runs allowed to 1st in runs allowed. So 16-10 record for the month of August. Nice bounce back from the losing record that we had in July. And we're still 3 games worse than expectations, but it's going to be a shock if we don't end up playing postseason baseball this year when all is said and done. But right now we're going to turn our attention to that roster expansion and hopefully bring on some players to help us get this potential playoff team across the finish line. And we've made it to September roster expansion. We brought Drake Baldwin back. He just got healthy, so he's going to become our starting catcher again. Ken Weaver will move into a backup role for us. We should have Jaden Boakai back in a few days. Still waiting, though, on some of the other guys. Manzardo's still a week to 2 away, and Mason Miller's return is unknown. So presumably Weaver will be heading down to AAA shortly when Boakai is ready to come back from that oblique strain, but uncertain when Manzardo and Miller are going to be back. Until then, we've got 4 players, and I believe they're all making their major league debuts with us. Ted Johnston is a player we picked up in a trade with Atlanta last offseason. He was 12-1 with a 3.39 ERA for us in AAA. View him as a guy who very well could be able to help out in the back end of the rotation going forward, particularly with the fact that we're going to be losing a couple of our top-end starters most likely this offseason. So interested in seeing what Johnston can do at the major league level. And we've brought up 3 position players, all of whom have had monster seasons in AAA. Bob Day, who was our 6th-round draft pick out of Pepperdine in 2030, hit .312 with 35 homers and 105 ribbies in AAA for us this year. A pretty versatile defensive player, although outside of first base, he's not particularly adept anywhere. But he put up a 133 WRC plus for us. Not sure at 25 years old how significant Day is to our long-term plans, but interested in seeing what he'll be able to do against major league pitching, since he really doesn't have much left to prove in the minors. Also brought up Andy Toribio, a guy who we picked up in a trade with San Francisco about 2.5 years ago at this point. He's come up through our system. He hit .300 with 34 homers and 96 ribbies in AAA. He is another very versatile defensive player and a higher quality defensive player than Day, who also has some attractive personality traits. Could certainly see the durable Toribio being in the mix to be a middle infielder for us next year. So excited to see what he can do at the major league level. And then last but not least, and the only player who's going to get some regular playing time in the starting lineup is Israber Stewart. You may remember him. He was our 2nd-round pick way back in 2026. 25 years old now. It's been a long slog for him to get through the minors, but he probably had the best year of any of these 3 guys in AAA this year, hitting .310, 38 homers, and 114 ribbies, put up a 138 WRC plus. Another versatile defensive player who certainly could be an interesting bat for us as a backup infielder / utility man going forward, and who knows, could make a case at some point down the line to be a starting first baseman or a shortstop for us. We're actually going to play him in left field, where he's not particularly proficient at this point, but hopefully Day and Toribio will also get a few at-bats here as we try to guide this Oakland A's team back into the playoffs. And taking a look at our schedule for this month of September, Texas is the team that we're going to be playing most frequently. So if we want a chance to give them a run in the division, we've got the opportunity. We've got 4 games at home against them at the beginning of the month, and then 3 more at home against them towards the end of September. Being 12 games out, it's unlikely that we're going to go 7-0 in those 7 games, and even if we do, there's still another 5 games to make up in the standings, but good to know that it will at least get a chance to test ourselves against the best team in baseball this month. After the homestand, 4 games against Texas, we've got 3 against Cleveland before we go on the road to face the Yankees and the White Sox. Then home again against the Padres and the Angels and Texas in a nice long homestand of 9 games. And then we finish off the season out east, 3 games at Boston, and then 4 games against Tampa that will bleed into the month of October. And we've taken 2 of the first 3 against Texas, so we've cut the gap to 11. Not that I think it's realistic that we're really going to catch them. The real battle is going to be whether we can get past the Orioles or the Yankees to have home field advantage in that wild card series, because with a 8-game lead for us against the White Sox, we are pretty much locked in at this point to the first or second wild card in the American League. The hope is that we'll be able to get to the first spot in the wild card, and we'll ultimately end up hosting the Orioles or the Yankees, but we'll see how that goes over this next month or so. Some good news on the injury front also. We knew that Boakai, or we expected that Boakai was going to be back after 3 days, which he is. Mason Miller has also recovered from that unknown recovery time. So both of those guys should hopefully be able to join us real soon. Might give them a day or two in AAA in the case of Boakai, and might give Miller one start down there just to shake the rust off. But good that they'll both be healthy and hopefully ready to contribute to this playoff push for us. And we've continued to play very well. We ended up taking 3 out of 4 against Texas, and now we've just swept Cleveland. So we've won 6 games in a row. Off day today before we face the Yankees in what will be an important 3-game set. We're 9 back in the division, but you can see we're only half a game behind the Yankees at this point for that number 1 wild card spot. Our magic number is down to 10, and certainly would love to get past the Yankees and have the home field advantage for that eventual wild card series that we will be playing against the runner-up of the American League East, unless something extremely crazy happens over these last few weeks of the season. We did just make some roster changes, brought, if I could click properly, which is always an issue for me, brought Jaden Boakai back up to the roster, so he and Baldwin are now back in their normal platoon. And we also brought Mason Miller back up, and we are going to go with a 6-man rotation for the rest of the year. Try to keep the starting pitching as strong as possible. Ultimately, also, when we get into the final days of the season, depending on how the standings look, it's possible that we'll be looking to rest up some starters to ensure that we have the 3 that we want against the AL East rival that we'll be facing in the wild card series. But we're going to hopefully have to play some real good baseball over the next couple of weeks to ensure that we're kind of locked into hopefully that home field position in the final few days, and we'll really be able to set things up. It's very conceivable that someone in the rotation may end up being our closer for the playoffs. It's possible Levi Sterling could go back to that role. It's honestly not inconceivable that Miller, after nearly a decade away from that closer role for the A's, could end up there for the playoffs as well. But when you look at the performance of all 5 of our starting pitchers, and particularly what Levi Sterling has done since he has gone into the rotation as a starter now, a 5-1 record with a 2.50 ERA, just doesn't seem to fair to knock anyone out of the rotation. So in an effort to keep the workloads manageable, since we've got extra players up on the team, we'll run a 6-man rotation, and hopefully that'll enable us to keep the starters healthy until we get to the playoffs. To go ahead and make the room for Miller on the roster, we actually sent down Cody Morton, who had been with us ever since we picked him up in that trade with Colorado. Only had 63 at-bats, and he was only hitting 206. He very well will likely be in the mix to be on our Major League roster next year, but this was his final option year, and figured we kind of have a sense of what we have with Morton, who will be 28 years old soon. Wanted to continue to allow the youngsters Bob Day and Andy Toribio, along with Israber Stewart, to get a little Major League experience, even if they're not playing regularly quite yet. And we did take 2 out of 3 in the Bronx against the Yankees to win the first series of this road trip. 3 left against Chicago before the final homestand of the regular season. Just started Kyle Manzardo on what we think will be a pretty brief rehab assignment in AAA, but given that he's been out close to a month now, coming back from a concussion, figure it probably makes sense to give him a couple of games against pitching that's not quite as high quality as what he'll be facing in the majors. But with the 2 out of 3 wins against the Yankees, we are half a game up on the Yankees to be hosting that future wild card series. Our magic number to clinch a playoff spot is down to 7. We're only 8 games behind the Rangers. It's not impossible for us to catch them, but their magic number is 12. The Yankees now a game and a half behind the Orioles in the American League East. And we just swept the series in Chicago, so we have had an outstanding month of September thus far, an 11-2 record for our Oakland A's as we close in on a 4th playoff trip in 5 years. As I mentioned, this final homestand of the year, San Diego, the Angels, and Texas before we go on the road against Boston and Tampa Bay to finish things off. But as we sit here on September 16th, we've closed the gap to just 6.5 on the Rangers. I think we're probably going to run out of days to catch them, but we're at least making it interesting. And we're now a game and a half up on the Yankees to potentially host that wild card series. So hopefully if we have a good homestand, we'll certainly get the 4 wins or losses by our rivals to clinch a playoff spot, and maybe we'll be in a position where for that final series of the season in Tampa, we can kind of tweak our rotation and ensure that we'll be set up with the exact pitchers that we want for that potential wild card series with the Yankees. We did just bring Manzardo back from that brief rehab assignment, and to make room for him, we sent Bob Day back down. Day did well in his very limited sample size. He was 2 for 4 with a couple of runs scored and 3 walks, but he was not getting regular playing time. Obviously, going to be getting even less potentially with Manzardo on the roster, so figured he certainly indicated that he could be an important bat off the bench for us in the future, and we'll give him a little more playing time these last couple weeks of the AAA season where he can play every day rather than primarily sitting around with Oakland. And unfortunately, we lost as many games in the first 3 games of the series against San Diego as we had lost in the first 2 weeks of the month, dropping 2 out of 3 to the Padres. And with the standings being as tight as they were, the Yankees, who swept their series, are now half a game ahead of us to be hosting that wild card series. And we've dropped 8.5 behind the Rangers. Their magic number is just down to 5, but our magic number for clinching a 3rd consecutive playoff berth and a 4th berth in 5 years is down to 1. So it's ultimately going to be a pretty successful season for these A's. We should end up with well over 90 wins when all is said and done. We just happen to be playing in the division with the best team in baseball. And we took the first 2 games against the Angels, so that was positive. But we've suffered an injury. This is not one that's going to be crippling for us. If we're going to have an injury, I guess this is the way for it to happen. But Vince Shaver, torn flexor tendon, and he's going to be out for 13 months. So he's going to miss all of next year. This is a guy who we drafted out of Lamar in the 15th round. He's become a decent reliever prospect for us, but with the fact that he's going to miss all of 2034, that will mean that there's 2 of the last 3 years that injuries cost him an entire season. He had been respectable for us at the major league level, no decisions, 4.15 ERA over 13 innings, but at this point, unlikely that we will be seeing Mr. Shaver until 2035. And with that injury that could likely be a significant impact on the future career of Vince Shaver, we're going to use that as an opportunity to get a look at another guy. And Jaheim Penniman, the second overall pick in the 2028 draft. He's been on the major league roster because he's needed to be on, or not the major league roster, but he's needed to be on the 40-man roster this year based on his service time. And he is going to get an opportunity to make his major league debut at the age of 23. Don't think he's quite the pitcher we hoped he was going to become when we picked him second overall. Looks like his control is going to be an issue. Split this year between AA and AAA, 10-4 with a 4.68 ERA in AA. And he went 5-0 with a 4.38 ERA in AAA. Cut the walks down significantly in AAA compared to AA, and combined for a 3.5 WAR across those two levels. I think it's very conceivable that Penniman will end up beginning next year in AAA again, but given that we're going with the 6-man rotation, wanted to ensure that we had enough guys working out of the bullpen, and Penniman will join Ted Johnston in a long relief role and maybe get a little action in middle relief here as we try to guide these A's into the playoffs. And we're also taking a look at a lot of the pitching prospects that we've been growing up in our organization over the past close to decade at this point. And although we had clinched a playoff spot by virtue of those 2 wins against the Angels, things haven't been going great since then. Lost the last game of the series against them, and then we dropped 2 out of 3 against Texas. So overall, a 4-5 homestand, not particularly impressive. 7-game road trip left before we finish up the season, 3 at Boston and then 4 at Tampa. With 7 games to go, we are out of it in the playoffs or in the AL West after losing 2 of 3 to Texas. We are a half game ahead of the Yankees, though, despite losing those 2 in a row in the battle to see which team will be hosting the AL wildcard series, with the Yankees now 3.5 behind Baltimore. Pretty secure that it's likely to be us against the Yankees in the wild card series. The good news is that with the Red Sox and the Rays ahead of us, we're facing 2 of the worst teams in the American League. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to maybe win 5 of 7 games, and would love to be in a situation where when we head into those final couple games against Tampa, we are hopefully locked into a spot where we'll be hosting that wild card series against the Yankees, and we can start to set up our pitching staff to ensure that we'll have the 2 or 3 pitchers that we want to have on the mound starting games in that series. And unfortunately, the series against the Red Sox didn't go as we had hoped. We won the first game in Fenway, but then lost the final 2 of the series. So as we sit here with 4 games to go, the Yankees, who have won 5 in a row, are now a game and a half ahead of us. It's going to be tough for us to catch them. Certainly need to win this game against Tampa Bay today, while the Yankees are likely having an off day. And we'll see if we can close the gap to 1 game with 3 to go. But very conceivable that unfortunately we'll be on the road for that best of 3 wild card series with the Yankees. But positively, the rotation is stacking up pretty well with 4 games to go. We've got Ferris, Burns, and then DeCaro set, so we really don't have to tweak the rotation at all. We're going to be pitching our most experienced pitchers in this game against Tampa Bay, or this series against Tampa Bay, and then with the off day or 2 before the wild card series start, should be all set up to have Ferris and or Burns at the top of the rotation when we begin that playoff series against the Yankees. The hope again is that maybe we sweep this series in Tampa, the Yankees struggle a bit, and we can get past them to have home field advantage. But at the very least, we should have the pitchers that we want on the mound, whether we'll be playing in the Oakland Coliseum or Yankee Stadium. And we did get a 6-0 victory on the Yankees off day, a Nice performance from Jackson Ferris. 4 hits, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts in 5 2/3 innings. So he wins the player of the game. And as I said, Ferris should be all set to be pitching game number 1 of that wild card series against the Yankees. Interesting situation now. The Orioles lost yesterday, and they've now lost 4 in a row. So the Yankees and the Orioles are both a game ahead of us, but there are 2 teams in play. I wonder if the schedule happened to be set up so that the Yankees would be playing the Orioles these final days of the season. And it is set up well for us. The Yankees are going to be hosting Baltimore for these final 3 games. So honestly, I think our hope is kind of that one of the teams sweeps the others. That makes it most simple for us to hopefully clinch a home field for that series against either the Yankees or the Orioles, but we're 1 game behind them. So the best case scenario for us, since we are obviously not going to win our division, is probably for either the Yankees or the Orioles to sweep and one of them to end up with just 94 wins, because then if we get 1 win, we'll be in the mix to go to a tiebreaker, and if we get 2 wins, we'll actually end up with home field for the wild card series. So who knows what's going to happen. The most important thing is that we take care of our business against Tampa, but also kind of hoping in the back of our mind that one of the AL East teams sweeps the other one. And we did do our job on the final day of September, beating Tampa. So we've got 2 games left against Tampa. The Orioles stopped their losing streak in the first game in the Bronx. So we are in a flat-footed tie with the Yankees right now. I guess we might as well look at the team by team so we know what we are dealing with. We were 4-3 against Baltimore. Unfortunately, we were 3-4 against the Yankees. So if we end up in a tie for that for the first and second wild card spots with the Orioles, we'll have home field advantage. If we end up tied for those first and second wild card spots with the Yankees, they will unfortunately have home field advantage over us. And we did our job once again in the penultimate game of the season, a 2-1 victory over Tampa in extra innings. Maui Ahuna with the run-scoring single in the top of the 10th to give us the lead, and Ahuna with a run-scoring single in the top of the 8th to tie things up for us. So a nice comeback victory for us. DeCaro, although he wasn't involved in the decision, had a really nice game for us. And taking a look at the standings now, and the Yankees beat the Orioles, so we're not getting the sweep that we had hoped for, but we are in a position right now where we control our own destiny. If we win today against Tampa, that will get us to 96 wins, and 96 wins is also going to win the AL East, and 95 for whoever loses will be a game behind us. Obviously, if we lose and the Orioles lose, it looks like the tiebreaker will favor us and we'll still have home field advantage. But the easiest path to hosting those 2 or 3 wild card games for us is just to win this final game of the season against Tampa. Tampa does have a little bit to play for, though, because they can avoid a 100-loss season if they beat us here in game number 162. And fortunately, we're not going to need to go to tiebreakers. We routed the Rays 10-0 on the final day of the season. Nice outing from DeVore, allowed 6 hits over 6 1/3 innings. And the youngster Pennyman with the final 2 2/3 innings for the former number 2 overall pick. Gets his ERA for his brief foray into the majors down to 3.38. So he had a rough outing in his first game, but the second game of his major league career goes much better. And we had a cycle. Should have looked more closely. Jake Ortega, 4 hits and 5 at-bats, 3 ribbies, 2 runs scored, and he hits for the cycle as we clinch the home field advantage for our wild card series. Taking a look at the standings, the Yankees ended up winning 2 of the final 3 in the Bronx to clinch the American League East. But with our 4 straight wins to finish off the season, we will be hosting that wild card series against the Orioles. The 96 wins for us, although we are not a division winner, is, I believe, the most that we have ever had in this playthrough. Let's take a look at our history. And yeah, even our World Series team, when we won our lone division title in 2029, only got to 94 wins that year. So 10 wins better than we were a year ago, despite a lot of turnover this past offseason. A 3rd consecutive second-place finish in the AL West for us, and as we've talked about, a 3rd consecutive playoff berth, and we'll see if we can win a wild card series for a 3rd straight year. Taking a look at the final team statistics, still ended up a little worse than expected, 3 games below Pythagorean expectations, 18-9 record in September, and 2-0 in October, so we're playing as well as we have this entire season as we head into the playoffs. Finish the year 5th in runs scored and 1st in runs allowed, so right where we were the last time that we checked in. And with that, we'll call it an episode. With that big run towards the end of the season, we've gotten our record over these 10 years up to 809 and 811. So a winning year for us, assuming we are back with the A's in year number 11, will mean that we will be at 500 or better, which, given some of those difficult seasons we had in the early days, and given the fact that we've pretty much been a perennial low-budget team, is not a bad situation. We are in the final year of our contract. The 96 and 66 record obviously means that we will reach the playoffs, and when all was said and done, we had modest improvement at second base and modest improvement in our team stolen bases. You never know what's going to happen when you do a end-of-season review, but my hunch is that we will be able to come back and remain GM in Oakland if we want to. Luis Lara, banged up with knee tendonitis, going to have a moderate impact on his running. Tend to think we will still probably have our good center fielder on the playoff roster for that series against the Orioles. And we will find out how the playoffs go in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.